And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again today, and we're taking a look at some older games this time. Today's going to be Caylus. It's a worker placement game for 2 to 5 players. It will play in about an hour to 2.5 hours. There's quite a range. And it's really about building a castle in France. It's about building a town and a castle in France. And it's kind of considered to be one of the granddaddies of all worker placement games. So that said, why don't we take a look at what you get inside the box and how it plays. So when you open the box and you have, the first thing you need to do is you need to get through the rules in order to learn this game. And the rules in this game are kind of dense, and that is because this is a dense game. Now, when you take a look at it, it's several pages. There's nice color illustrations. It's well laid out. It's easy to reference, but the problem is that there's a lot to learn here. The rules do a good job of introducing you to it. It's a great way to learn the game. As usual, it's always helpful to have somebody to teach you the game, but you can learn the game from this rulebook. It's well written, it's well laid out, and all around a decent resource for the game. So here we have the board for Caylus, and as you can see, it's a nice colorful board depicting a castle and a winding road going away from that castle. The objective of the game, or the center focus of the game, is to be building this castle and to be building buildings along the road, which will provide you with goods, points, or different other favors throughout the game, such as this King's Favor thing over here, which will allow you to get either more points, or more money, or more goods whenever you use a favor. Along the outside of the track, you can see a victory point marker, which will allow you to keep track of your points throughout the game. The game will last for 3 phases, which are indicated by the 3 sections of the castle that you will build throughout the game. When the last section of the castle is built, the game will end. Much of the focus of the game of Caylus is around buildings that will be placed on the board. Several buildings start on the board, and they're notated by these pink-colored buildings, and they will be the start buildings available at the beginning of the game. Now, these often give you different things. For example, this one here provides you with 1 stone, while this one here allows you to build another building if you have the resources needed to build that building, which you will choose from a common supply. Other buildings built throughout the game are of different types. For example, you have these wooden buildings, wooden notated by the brownish color of the building. This one here, when you take an action on the building, allows you to take either 2 pink cubes or a purple cube, and this one allows you to take 2 wood or 2 brown cubes. Further down, you'll be able to build stone buildings with other buildings that allow you to build them. And this one will allow you to take combinations of pink and purple cubes, and whoever actually owns the building will be able to take a pink or purple cube as well. This building here allows you to pay 2 money to take 1 gold cube, or 5 money to take 2 gold cubes. Additionally, there are buildings without actions really available for them, and these are called prestige buildings. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, they're worth 14 victory points and 1 favor. The victory points indicated by the shield, and the favor by the fleur-de-lis. The last type of building are residential buildings, which you can actually convert your previously out-of-date buildings into these residential buildings, and they're notated by a green color. They will provide you with 1 income each turn, which is useful for paying things throughout the game, and they will also give you a certain amount of victory points. You'll note, as I failed to mention previously, that there is a cost for building each of these buildings listed in the upper left-hand corner. This is what you must pay when you build that building. Last but not least, we have all of the little bits that come with Caylus. As you can see, there are 5 player colors, and then there's this whole batch of cubes over here, as well as some other little pieces. The cubes are used for marking goods. You can see there's pink, brown, yellow, gray, purple, and they're all for different goods, gold being the hardest to get. And then you have player pieces here. And player pieces come in 3 different types. As you can see, we have these little cylinders here, which are going to denote the workers of a player. We have these houses, which will denote which buildings belong to a player. And we have these little discs here, which are just used for marking things on the board, such as points, or player turn order, or various other things. Lastly, in the game, we have included 2 little white discs. One is the bailiff, and one is the provost. The provost is the shorter of the white discs, and will actually be used to mark which buildings will be activated on a turn. Moving this back and forth is much of the direct conflict in the game, because if the provost is before a certain building on the board and a player has tried to activate that building, it will just get skipped for the turn and that player will lose their action. The bailiff will move along the road either at a slower or faster pace based along where the provost is, and will force players to build further along the road. When the bailiff reaches a certain point, the game will end. Finally, we have the money pieces, which are little cardboard chits in 5 and 1 denominations. You can see here that they're of decent quality. They're good to use. They actually are nice in that I don't have to use poker chips to replace them. And all around, the quality of components in the game is very good. So looking at the board, we have multiple options that you can take on your turn, and as I said, this is a worker placement game, so you're going to be placing workers around the board and taking actions with them. The first area you can see on the board is the castle, which allows you to place there and turn combinations of cubes in order to construct parts of the castle, the towers, the walls, and, the other sections. But essentially in the first round, you have to contribute groups of cubes with a pink and 2 other cubes in order to put one of your little houses here, saying that you've contributed to the castle, and you'll earn some points. This is important because throughout the game it will also allow you to get king's favors at the end of each of the scoring rounds, which will move up these indicators, giving you either more points, more money, the ability to take cubes, or to build buildings without certain goods or resources. The second option is to place on either the pre-printed buildings or some of the neutral buildings that are already on the board, and placing on these will allow you to take an action. So this one, for example, makes sure that you always only pay 1 money to place your workers. And as people pass, the actual cost to place workers will go up. So if 2 people have passed, it'll be 3 money to place each of your workers. If 3 people have passed, it'll be 4 money. And so as the game goes on, as more people pass on their turns, it gets more and more expensive to place so that you can't get out of control. Alternatively, you can place here to modify the turn order. Placing on 1 makes you first, 2 makes you second, and so on. This one will allow you to trade in cubes and money for king's favor. And this one will allow you to move the provost up and down the line for free in order to dictate which actions can and cannot be taken on a turn. This will give you 3 money, and there are various other things on the board. Now the neutral pieces allow you to either take goods, to build buildings, or to trade cubes in for money or various other things. For example, if I were to use this one, I could take a wood cube. This one will allow me to take either a wood or a cloth, a stone, or to trade in cubes for money. And this one here is special in that it allows you to build a building from the common supply. For example, this one says I can build a wood building as long as I have the appropriate resources. So, I can take this wood building here, for example, pay the 2 cubes, a wood and any other cube, and place it on the first empty spot of the board. This now becomes my building, which if anybody uses in the future, will give me victory points, and also gives me 4 victory points immediately upon building. Players can place on other people's buildings, using them and giving them prestige points, place on their own buildings, or place on neutral buildings, so as to best balance the goods that they need with the victory points that they're giving away. At the end of each round, or actually after everybody's placed their workers, the provost will move. And in passing order, players will have the option to pay 1 to 3 money to move the provost 1 to 3 spaces, either forward or backwards. Moving him backwards will disallow any buildings past the provost to be used for their action that turn. So for example, in this case, green would not be able to activate and would not have been able to build this building. However, green could later, after another player has moved, move the provost back and say, okay, well no, now he's this way, so now that building will be activated and I can build my building. That'll continue going until all players have had their options, and then buildings will be activated in order starting at the top of the road and moving down. Depending on where the provost is at the end of the turn, the bailiff will move forward, and he'll either move 1 space if the provost is behind him, or 2 spaces if the provost is past him, for example. Then the provost will move back to the spot of the bailiff. When the bailiff reaches these 3 markers here, the phases of the game will change. You can see these correspond to the areas on the castle that I showed you earlier. 3 phases of the game, 3 scoring phases, and when you reach the tower section, the game will end. Alternatively, if the tower is completely built before the bailiff reaches that region, the game will end prematurely, and the players will calculate their final scores. So that's Caylus in a nutshell. Really, that's a very abbreviated version of the game. Now that's because I really just can't take the time to really describe all of the rules of the game to you. There's a lot going on. It's a very deep game. It's a real brain burner, actually. There's a lot to think about. It's not for somebody who has analysis paralysis. There's a lot of options here. What you really need to do is sit down and figure out what's best for you, how you can best use buildings from other people, or use your own buildings, or really manipulate the neutral buildings in order to best get what you need. The game will last for 3 rounds, as I said. when the bailiff either reaches that last spot, or you've built the whole tower, or the whole last segment, I can't remember what it's called. The game will end and you'll calculate your final victory points, and whoever has the most will win. And really, it's a great game. It's probably actually one of my favorite worker placement games. It doesn't hit the table that much because of the depth and the amount of thought that it requires. A lot of people prefer lighter games. But this is one I'd really like to see get out more often. It's a classic. It's amazing. I really do suggest this to anybody who really likes deep, thoughtful worker placement games.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.
Yeah?